A single piece of paper held in the weathered hands of an old man was about to destroy a rising star on Wall Street. On the 9:15 a.m. Starlight Express hurtling from New York to Chicago in first-class luxury, a confrontation was brewing. It wasn't about stolen luggage or a spilled drink. It was about a ticket, a strange, old-fashioned ticket, that one passenger, a man who had everything, found hilarious. He didn't know that the signature on that ticket belonged to the most powerful man in the company, and the quiet, elderly gentleman he chose to ridicule was the reason that signature existed at all. His laughter would echo into a karma so severe it would strip him of everything he valued. The first-class carriage of the Starlight Express No. 7 was a world unto itself. It was less a mode of transport and more a rolling sanctuary of privilege designed to insulate its occupants from the mundane realities of the world flashing past their panoramic windows. The seats were less like chairs and more like thrones upholstered in buttery soft Italian leather, the color of rich cream. Polished mahogany panels gleamed under the soft recessed lighting, and the air hummed with a quiet efficiency, smelling faintly of brewed coffee leather and the subtle expensive perfume of its passengers. In one of these plush seats sat Kyle Thompson. At 29, Kyle was the living embodiment of aggressive success. His suit was a custom-tailored Tom Ford, a sharp silhouette of charcoal grey that probably cost more than the average person's monthly rent. His watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus, was a subtle but undeniable declaration of his status. He worked as a senior associate for Sterling and Finch Capital, a ruthless hedge fund that chewed up and spat out lesser men. Kyle, however, was a survivor. He was a shark, and the world was his ocean. Beside him, Chloe Vance sipped her complimentary mimosa, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of adoration and ambition. She was beautiful, poised, and acutely aware that being with Kyle was a strategic move as much as it was a romantic one. They were a power couple in the making, and this trip was a celebration of Kyle's latest triumph. He was on the verge of closing the biggest acquisition of his career. "The board at Viridian Dynamics are dinosaurs, Chloe," Kyle said, his voice a low, confident boom that effortlessly cut through the carriage's gentle hum. "They're still talking about corporate ethics and long-term stability." I had to sit through a 2-hour lunch listening to their chairman drone on about company culture. I almost fell asleep in my lobster bisque. Chloe laughed, a tinkling sound that was perfectly practiced. "But you won them over, didn't you?" "Of course I did." Kyle smirked, adjusting his silk tie. "Money speaks a language even dinosaurs understand. Once this deal closes, I'm not just a senior associate anymore. We're talking about junior partners. The penthouse apartment, the summer house in the Hamptons, it's all lining up." He leaned back, surveying the carriage with a proprietary air, as if he owned it. His gaze swept over the other passengers, a senator reading the Wall Street Journal, a famous actress hiding behind oversized sunglasses, a tech mogul typing furiously on his laptop. These were his people. This was his world. Then his eyes landed on the man sitting alone across the aisle. The man was elderly, likely in his late 70s or early 80s. He was black with a crown of wiry white hair and deeply etched lines on his face that spoke of a long and eventful life. But it was his attire that caught Kyle's scornful attention. In this cocoon of luxury brands and tailored perfection, the old man wore a simple, slightly faded tweed jacket, comfortable-looking corduroy trousers, and sturdy, well-worn leather boots. He wasn't reading a financial paper or checking stock prices. He was simply looking out the window, a small, serene smile on his face as he watched the American heartland roll by. To Kyle, he was an anomaly, an error in the carefully curated algorithm of first class. He looked like someone who had wandered in from the economy section by mistake. "Look at that guy," Kyle murmured to Chloe, nudging her discreetly. "How did he even get a ticket for this carriage? Did he win the lottery?" Chloe glanced over her expression, momentarily unreadable, before she defaulted to mirroring Kyle's amusement. Maybe he's someone's grandfather being sent off to a nursing home in style. The comment was cruel, but it made Kyle chuckle. He felt a surge of superiority. The world had rules. It had hierarchies. And this old man, with his simple clothes and quiet demeanor, was breaking them just by being there. Kyle felt an irrational irritation, a need to reinforce the natural order of things. The old man seemed oblivious to their stares. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book and a pen. He began to write, his hand steady, his focus absolute. He wasn't a lost passenger. He was perfectly at peace, a picture of quiet dignity that for some reason only irked Kyle more. The smooth, almost imperceptible glide of the train was a testament to the engineering of the Starlight Express. It was the flagship line of the North American Rail Corporation, NARC, a titan of industry that had revolutionized passenger rail travel. Its trains were marvels of modern technology and luxury, and a first-class ticket was a significant status symbol. Kyle continued his hushed commentary to Chloe, dissecting the old man's appearance, speculating on his backstory with casual cruelty. For him, this was a game, a way to pass the time and reaffirm his own place at the top of the food chain. He had no idea that the quiet old man across the aisle wasn't just a passenger on this train. In a way, he was on the train. And the judgment Kyle was so freely dispensing was about to be returned to him, with an interest rate so high it would bankrupt his entire life. The wheels of the train were turning, but so were the wheels of fate, and they were bringing a reckoning right on schedule. An hour into the journey, a uniformed conductor entered the first-class carriage. He was a tall, imposing man named Frank Miller, a veteran of the rails with 30 years of service. He carried himself with an air of polite authority, his movements practiced and efficient. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Tickets, please," he announced, his voice calm and respectful. He moved down the aisle, his electronic scanner beeping pleasantly as he scanned the QR codes on passengers' phones and the barcodes on their printed tickets. He greeted the senator by name, shared a brief, knowing nod with the actress, and offered a professional smile to everyone. His progress was smooth and unremarkable until he reached Kyle and Chloe. Kyle presented his phone with a flourish. The scanner beeped. "All set, Mr. Thompson. Enjoy your journey." "We plan to," Kyle said a little too loudly. Frank then turned to the old man, sitting across the aisle. "Your ticket, sir." The old man, whose name was Samuel Washington, looked up from his journal. He gave the conductor a warm, gentle smile. "Of course, Frank. Good to see you again." Frank paused, a flicker of confusion on his face. The old man knew his name. He searched his memory, trying to place the face, but came up blank. He'd seen thousands of passengers over the years. Samuel reached into the inside pocket of his tweed jacket, the same one Kyle had mentally ridiculed, and retrieved not a phone or a printed e-ticket, but a small, stiff card. It wasn't a modern ticket. It was made of thick, cream-colored vellum, about the size of a playing card. The edges were worn smooth with time, and the text was not printed, but written in an elegant, old-fashioned cursive with a fountain pen. He handed it to Frank. From across the aisle, Kyle watched with unconcealed contempt. He leaned towards Chloe, his voice a stage whisper designed to be overheard. "Get a load of this. Is that a library card? Maybe it's a raffle ticket from a bingo game." Chloe stifled a giggle, hiding her mouth behind her hand. The comment was just loud enough to cause a few nearby passengers to glance over. Samuel heard it but showed no reaction, his gaze remaining fixed on the conductor. Frank Miller took the card. His brow furrowed. He'd never seen anything like it. The railway had phased out paper tickets years ago, and even those hadn't looked like this. This was something else entirely. It felt more like an artifact than a ticket. At the top, in ornate script, were the words, "Starlight Express Railways." Below that it read, "Permit the bearer, Samuel Washington. Lifetime passage on any train in any class at any time. May his journey always be comfortable and his path be clear." It was the final line that made Frank's breath catch in his throat. It wasn't a corporate slogan or a line of fine print. It was a personal dedication. And below it was a signature, a bold, sweeping signature that Frank recognized instantly. He saw it every month on his paycheck, on every major corporate directive, on the plaques that dedicated new stations. It was the signature of David Smith, the formidable CEO of the North American Rail Corporation. Kyle, unable to contain his derision, leaned forward. "Having some trouble there, conductor? Does the ancient artifact not scan? Maybe you need to blow the dust off it first." His voice was now loud enough for the entire carriage to hear. The senator lowered his newspaper. The actress peered over her sunglasses. The atmosphere had shifted from quiet luxury to uncomfortable tension. Frank Miller ignored him. His eyes were glued to the signature and then back to the name on the ticket. Samuel Washington. A name. A signature. The pieces were clicking together in his mind, forming a picture that made the blood drain from his face. He remembered the stories, the legends whispered among senior staff. The tales of the company's origins, of the man who started it all with a single failing rail line and a vision. Kyle, emboldened by the attention, stood up, slightly pointing a manicured finger at the ticket in Frank's hand. "Seriously, what is that? Is that even legal? I paid $2,000 for my seat. I expect a certain standard. I don't want to be sharing the carriage with people who seem to have found their ticket in a museum. It's a matter of security, you know." He was performing now, playing to an audience he believed was on his side. He was the successful young professional rightly questioning the presence of an interloper. He was the guardian of first-class decorum. Samuel Washington finally turned his head. His dark, intelligent eyes locking with Kyle's for the first time. There was no anger in his gaze, only a profound and weary disappointment. It was the look of a man who had seen the very best and the very worst of human nature, and was saddened, but not surprised, to be witnessing the latter once again. Young man Samuel said, his voice quiet, yet carrying a surprising weight that seemed to absorb the sound in the carriage. "That piece of paper has more history in it than you can imagine. I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully." The warning was delivered not as a threat, but as a piece of genuine fatherly advice. But to Kyle, it was a challenge. His ego puffed up by his recent successes, and the admiring gaze of his girlfriend would not allow him to back down to an old man in a shabby jacket. Or what Kyle sneered, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Are you going to write a complaint with your little fountain pen? I'm shaking in my $2,000 shoes. Just admit you snuck in here, and we can all move on." Frank Miller, the conductor, finally found his voice. It came out as a strangled whisper. He looked from the name on the card to the face of the old man, the recognition finally dawning, complete and terrifying. "Mr. Washington, sir, I am so sorry," he stammered, his professional composure completely shattered. He held the ticket as if it were a holy relic. "I didn't realize." "It's an honor, sir." Kyle stared, dumbfounded. "An honor. It's an honor to be shown a fake ticket." "What is wrong with you, Frank?" Ignored Kyle completely. His entire focus was on Samuel. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. "Please forgive me, sir, and forgive this passenger's ignorance." The shift in the conductor's demeanor was so sudden and so absolute that it silenced the entire carriage. The quiet hum of the train seemed to grow louder in the dead air. Chloe's smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Kyle stood there, his mouth slightly agape, the smirk frozen on his face. He had been so sure of his position, so certain of the social hierarchy. But in the space of a few seconds, the entire power dynamic of the carriage had been turned upside down. He had been playing checkers while the old man he was mocking had built the entire board. The paper he had laughed at was not a ticket. It was a crown. And Kyle had just spat on it. The silence in the carriage was thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the track. Every eye was now fixed on the scene unfolding in the aisle. Kyle Thompson stood frozen, his smug confidence evaporating like mist in a harsh sun. Frank Miller, the conductor, still held the vellum card, his hand trembling slightly. What is going on?" Kyle finally managed to stammer his voice, a pale imitation of its earlier boom. "Who is this guy?" Frank lifted his head, and the look he gave Kyle was one of pure, unadulterated contempt. The professional deference was gone, replaced by the cold fury of a loyal soldier witnessing an insult to his king. "This guy, Frank," said his voice low and trembling with controlled rage, "is Mr. Samuel Washington." The name hung in the air, but it meant nothing to Kyle. "So what, I'm Kyle Thompson of Sterling and Finch Capital. We're about to manage a fund larger than this entire railway's annual revenue. His name doesn't mean anything." A low chuckle came from across the aisle. It wasn't from Samuel. It was from the senator who had lowered his paper completely. He was a man named Senator Robert McCain, a long-serving politician who knew the history of American industry. Son, the senator said, his voice carrying the easy authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "If you work in finance and you don't know the name Samuel Washington, then your firm should fire you for incompetence. You're trying to manage a fund larger than this railway's revenue." Samuel Washington created that revenue. He built this railway. A collective gasp rippled through the carriage. Chloe's face went white. She looked at Samuel as if seeing him for the first time, not as an old man in a tweed coat, but as something monumental. Frank the conductor held up the card for Kyle to see, though Kyle's eyes were now wide with dawning panic. "This is pass number 001, Frank explained, his voice regaining its authority, now fueled by a sense of duty. It was the first and only lifetime pass ever issued by this company. It was presented to Mr. Washington on the day he retired as CEO, the man he hand-picked to be his successor. David Smith insisted on it. That's CEO Smith's signature at the bottom counter, signing a promise made by the entire board of directors. This pass gives Mr. Washington the right to command this train if he so chooses. It is the highest honor this company can bestow. The full weight of the revelation crashed down on Kyle. The old, faded ticket he'd mocked was a symbol of ultimate authority. The quiet, elderly man he had ridiculed as a vagrant was the founding father of the very corporation whose luxury service he was enjoying. The company Kyle had belittled by comparing its revenue to his fund's potential was this man's life's work, his legacy. Samuel Washington finally spoke, his voice calm and measured, cutting through the stunned silence. He addressed Frank, though his words were meant for everyone. "That's enough, Frank. There's no need for all this fuss. Please just continue with your duties." But the fuss had already been made. Frank, flustered and deeply embarrassed by the scene, spoke into his radio. "This is Miller in car 7. I need Ms. Albright to report to my position immediately. We have Code 1. A Code 1 was a designation reserved for the presence of a VVIP, a board member, or a C-suite executive. It triggered a protocol of the highest level. Within 2 minutes, a woman in a sharp, dark blue manager's uniform hurried into the carriage. This was Eleanor Albright, the head of onboard services for the entire train. Her face was a mask of professional concern. "Frank, what is it?" she asked, her eyes scanning the carriage. Frank simply pointed towards Samuel. Eleanor's eyes followed his finger, and her reaction was even more immediate than Frank's. She had been with the company for 25 years. She had started as a junior attendant when Samuel Washington was still a revered active presence in the company. She recognized him instantly. "Mr. Washington," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine shock and delight. She rushed to his seat, her professional demeanor melting away into one of warm, profound respect. "Sir, we had no idea you were on board. We didn't see your name on the manifest. Please forgive us. Is everything all right? Do you need anything? A private car? Shall we arrange a meal from the chef?" Samuel simply shook his head, a gentle smile returning to his face. "Eleanor, it's good to see you. You look well. And no, I don't need a thing. I put my name down as S. Walter for this trip. I was hoping for a quiet journey to see how the old lines were running. I just want to sit and watch the country go by." His gaze then shifted, moving past Eleanor to land on Kyle, who was now trying to shrink into his $2,000 seat. The old man's expression was not one of triumph or anger. It was one of pity. It seems Samuel said softly that a quiet journal. It was too much to ask for today. Eleanor Albright, sensing the lingering tension, finally noticed Kyle. Her professional smile hardened into a sheet of ice. She had heard the tail end of Kyle's taunts as she entered the carriage. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level as she addressed Kyle. "I understand you have been causing a disturbance. You have insulted a guest of this railway. In fact, you have insulted the founder of this railway." Kyle opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain. But no words came out. His mind was a frantic whirlwind of damage control. His deal with Viridian Dynamics, his reputation, his boss, Mr. Sterling, who prized discretion and professionalism above all else. Chloe was already pulling at his sleeve, her eyes wide with terror. "Kyle, apologize. Just apologize right now," she whispered frantically. But it was too late for a simple apology. The insult had been too public, the target too significant. The wheels of karma, like the wheels of the Starlight Express itself, were already in motion, and they were thundering down a track from which there was no escape. Kyle Thompson had laughed at a piece of paper, but he had torn up the blueprint of his own life. Eleanor Albright stood before Kyle, her posture rigid, her expression unyielding. She was no longer just the head of onboard services. She was the guardian of the company's honor, and it had been grievously wounded. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice clear and cold, ringing through the silent carriage. "On behalf of the North American Rail Corporation, I must ask you to gather your belongings. You and your companion will be moved to the economy carriage for the remainder of the journey." The sentence, though simple, was a stunning blow. In the world of Kyle Thompson, a demotion from first class to economy was more than an inconvenience. It was a public shaming, a stripping of status so profound as to be a form of social execution. No, Kyle blurted out a desperate, reflexive defiance. "I paid for this seat. You can't just kick me out. I have rights." Eleanor's eyebrow arched. "Your ticket, Mr. Thompson, is a contract which stipulates that we have the right to refuse or remove any passenger who causes a disturbance or harasses others. You have done both, and you have done so to a man to whom this company owes its very existence. You are lucky we are not putting you off the train at the next station, which I assure you is a remote service stop in the middle of Ohio." Chloe was now pale, tugging frantically at Kyle's arm. "Kyle, let's just go. Please. It's not a big deal." But for Kyle, it was the biggest deal. His entire identity was built on the foundation of his superiority, his membership in the elite club. To be cast out, to be forced to walk the length of the train in a parade of shame was a nightmare he couldn't fathom. His pride, bruised and battered, made one last fatal stand. "This is ridiculous," he said, trying to regain some semblance of his earlier arrogance. "I am a senior associate at Sterling and Finch. I am about to close a 9-figure acquisition. Do you know who my boss is? I will have your job for this. I will have this whole train decommissioned." The threat was so ludicrous, so disconnected from the reality of the situation, that it drew a small, incredulous laugh from the senator. Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply took out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it to her ear. "Yes, security. This is Albright in car 7. I have a passenger who is refusing to comply with a seat reassignment. Yes. Please send 2 agents to my location." "Thank you." She snapped her phone shut. "The choice is yours, Mr. Thompson. You can walk or you can be escorted. I assure you the latter will be far more memorable for everyone here." The mention of security agents was the final nail in the coffin of Kyle's resistance. The reality of his powerlessness crashed down on him. Here on this train, his money and his title were worthless. He had broken a sacred rule, and judgment was being rendered. With a look of utter defeat, he slowly began to gather his laptop bag. Chloe, her face a mask of humiliation, quickly stuffed her magazine and phone into her purse, refusing to look at anyone. As they stood to leave, Samuel Washington spoke again. His voice wasn't gloating or triumphant. It was filled with a deep, resonant sadness. "Young man," he said. And Kyle froze, forced to look at the man he had tormented. "Your worth is not determined by the cost of your suit or the class of your ticket." Samuel continued, his eyes holding Kyle's. "It is determined by how you treat people when you believe they have nothing to offer you. You failed that test today. I do not say this out of anger, but out of sorrow for you. A life built on looking down on others is a life lived in a deep, dark hole. I truly hope you find your way out of it." The words were not an attack, but a diagnosis. They cut deeper than any insult could have. Kyle had no response. He felt stripped bare, his arrogance and ambition revealed as nothing more than hollow armor. He and Chloe began the long walk of shame out of the first-class carriage. Every head was turned towards them. The senator watched them go with a shake of his head. The actress, no longer hiding, stared with open pity. Every passenger was a witness to his fall from grace. The soft carpet seemed to suck at his expensive shoes, making every step a monumental effort. The clinking of cutlery, the soft murmur of conversations that had resumed it all, sounded like a chorus of judgment to his ears. As they passed through the sliding glass door and into the less opulent business-class car, Chloe finally turned on him, her voice a venomous hiss. "How could you be so stupid, Kyle?" "So arrogant," she whispered fiercely, tears of anger and embarrassment welling in her eyes. "You had everything. We had everything. And you blew it all up to make fun of an old man." "How was I supposed to know who he was?" Kyle shot back, his voice cracking. "It doesn't matter who he was," Chloe retorted. "He was a person, an elderly man, minding his own business. What is wrong with you? Did you think that was impressive? Do you think being cruel makes you look powerful?" She pulled her arm away from his grasp. "Don't touch me." "The penthouse, the Hamptons. You were right. It was all lining up, and you just lit a match to it." Kyle had no answer. He had lost the argument, lost his status, and as he looked at the cold fury in Chloe's eyes, he realized he was losing her too. Back in the first-class carriage, a semblance of calm had returned. Eleanor Albright was profusely apologizing to Samuel Washington. "Sir, on behalf of the entire company, I am mortified. We will be conducting a full review of this incident." Samuel held up a hand. "Eleanor, it's not your fault. It's not Frank's fault. You both handled it with professionalism. The boy, he has a difficult path ahead of him. That is his own doing." He looked out the window again, his expression thoughtful. "You know, he said to no one in particular, I designed these windows myself. I wanted them to be wide enough so you wouldn't just see the landscape, but feel like you were a part of it. I wanted people to see the beauty of the country I love." He paused, a sad smile touching his lips. It seems some people are so busy looking at their own reflection in the glass, they forget to see the world on the other side. Unbeknownst to them all, the incident was far from over. In the corner of the carriage, the tech mogul, a young woman named Brenda Tran, CEO of a viral news startup, had not been typing code. She had been typing a story, and her phone, propped discreetly against a water glass, had not been idle. It had been recorded. The entire confrontation, from Kyle's first sneering comment to his walk of shame, was now a high-definition video file ready to be uploaded. Kyle Thompson thought his humiliation was contained within the metal walls of a train. He was wrong. It was about to go global. By the time the Starlight Express pulled into Chicago's Union Station, Kyle Thompson's world had already begun to burn. He and Chloe had completed the journey in stony, humiliated silence from a cramped economy-class car, surrounded by the very people he disdained. The finality of their relationship hung unspoken in the air. As they disembarked, Chloe didn't even look at him. "I'll have your things sent over," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Lose my number." She hailed a cab and was gone, disappearing into the city traffic and out of his life. Kyle stood on the platform, disoriented and alone. He believed the worst was over. He thought the incident on the train, while deeply embarrassing, was a self-contained disaster. He would go back to New York, lick his wounds, and immerse himself in the Viridian Dynamics deal. In the world of high finance, results were all that mattered. A moment of poor judgment could be erased by a sufficiently large profit margin. He was catastrophically wrong. Brenda Tran, the tech CEO from the first-class carriage, hadn't wasted a moment. Her company Viral Feed specialized in curating and distributing compelling human interest stories. The scene on the train was pure gold. She had edited the footage on her laptop during the journey, adding captions for clarity and blurring the faces of the other passengers, except for Kyle, Chloe, and Samuel. She titled it, "Arrogant Wall Street broker mocks elderly man on train, doesn't realize he's the company's founder." She uploaded it to every major social media platform just as the train was pulling into the station. The video was explosive. It was a perfectly packaged morality play for the digital age, a clear hero, a detestable villain, a dramatic twist, and satisfying karmic justice. It hit all the right notes. By the time Kyle's flight from Chicago landed at JFK in New York that evening, the video had 10 million views. By the time he got back to his silent, empty apartment, it was at 30 million, and was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Trainwrecked and #Samuel Washington were trending globally. His face was everywhere. Screenshots of his sneering expression had become instant memes. News outlets from the Daily Mail to Forbes had picked up the story. His name, Kyle Thompson, and his employer, Sterling and Finch Capital, were explicitly mentioned in every article. The internet, in its swift and unforgiving way, had appointed itself judge, jury, and executioner. Kyle's phone, which he had switched off for the flight, lit up like a Christmas tree the moment he turned it on. Hundreds of notifications flooded his screen. Texts from colleagues, missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, and a single terrifying email from his boss, Arthur Sterling. The subject line was one word, office, 7 a.m. He clicked on the link a friend had sent him. He watched the video, his blood turning to ice. He saw himself arrogant and cruel. He heard his own voice dripping with disdain. He saw the quiet dignity of Samuel Washington, the dawning horror on the conductor's face, the disgust in the eyes of the other passengers. He saw his entire world through the lens of a stranger's phone, and the person he saw was a monster. Sleep was impossible. He spent the night pacing his apartment, the city lights outside mocking his inner darkness. He had built his life on the perception of power and success. Now that perception had been shattered and replaced with a viral caricature of an entitled bully. The next morning he walked into the gleaming minimalist lobby of Sterling and Finch Capital. The air, usually buzzing with the energy of ambition and greed, felt different. It felt cold. The receptionist wouldn't meet his eye. Colleagues he usually shared cynical jokes with now stared at their screens as he passed, pretending to be absorbed in their work. The whispers followed him down the hall, like snakes slithering in the grass. He reached the corner office of Arthur Sterling. The door was ajar. "Close it," Sterling said, without looking up from his desk. He was a man in his 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that could chip granite. He had built his firm on two principles: making obscene amounts of money and maintaining an impeccable, impenetrable reputation. Kyle had threatened the second principle, which in turn threatened the first. "I can explain." Sir Kyle began, his voice hoarse. "Can you—" Sterling finally looked up, his gaze drilling into Kyle. He gestured to the large monitor on his wall, which was paused on a close-up of Kyle's face from the video. "Can you explain that? Can you explain why the name of my firm is currently being dragged through the mud on every news channel and social media site on the planet. Can you explain why I received a call at 6 a.m. this morning from the head of our PR department, who had apparently been up all night trying to stop our company from being associated with a public display of classless thuggery? It was a misunderstanding, Kyle pleaded. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But the Viridian deal is solid. I can still close it. The numbers are good. Sterling let out a dry, humorless laugh. The Viridian deal. You think this is still about the Viridian deal? He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the river of yellow cabs on the street below. Let me tell you about the Viridian deal, Kyle. Viridian Dynamics was founded by a man named George Maxwell. He's retired now, but he still holds a seat on the board and controls a significant voting bloc. George Maxwell and Samuel Washington served in the army together. They've been best friends for 60 years. George sits on the board of the Washington Charitable Foundation. Samuel is the godfather to George's eldest daughter. Sterling turned back to face Kyle, his expression grim. The chairman of Viridian called me an hour ago. He said, and I quote, "We would rather liquidate the company and sell it for parts than let it be acquired by a firm represented by a man like Kyle Thompson." The deal isn't just in jeopardy, Kyle. It's dead. You didn't just lose us the acquisition. You made Sterling and Finch an enemy of one of the most respected and well-connected industrialists in this country. Kyle felt the floor drop out from under him. The one thing he thought could save him his professional competence, his ability to make money, had been incinerated in the blaze of his personal failure. Sir, Mr. Sterling. Pack your desk. Kyle Sterling said, his voice flat and final. Security will escort you out. Your career at this firm is over. And frankly, after this, I doubt you'll be able to get a job managing a hot dog stand in this city. The karma wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a tidal wave, and it had just swept away his job, his reputation, and the 9-figure deal that was supposed to be his crowning achievement. He was no longer a shark. He was just chum in the water. The termination was brutal and swift. 2 stone-faced security guards men Kyle had never even noticed before stood by as he numbly packed his personal effects into a small cardboard box. His photos, his deal trophies, the stupid motivational paperweight Chloe had given him. It all felt like relics from another man's life. His colleagues who had once competed with him for bonuses and promotions now couldn't look him in the eye. He wasn't one of them anymore. He was a pariah, a cautionary tale. The walk out of the Sterling and Finch building was the longest of his life, even longer than the walk of shame on the train. The guards escorted him through the lobby, a public spectacle designed to send a clear message to the rest of the employees. As the glass doors slid shut behind him, sealing him out of the world he had fought so hard to conquer, he felt a profound and terrifying emptiness. He stood on the crowded Manhattan sidewalk, clutching his pathetic little box, a ghost in his own life. The city he once saw as his kingdom now felt alien and hostile. People rushing past him on the street seemed to recognize him, their glances a mixture of pity and contempt. He was no longer Kyle Thompson, Wall Street prodigy. He was now Train Guy, the villain from that viral video. The days that followed were a descent into a personal hell. His name was toxic. He sent out his resume to dozens of other firms, but the result was always the same. Silence. Or, in one case, a curt email from a recruiter. Given the recent high-profile events, we do not believe you are a suitable fit for our firm's culture. His professional network, built on transactional relationships and fair-weather friendships, had evaporated overnight. The calls he made went to voicemail. The emails he sent went unanswered. He had been excommunicated from the financial world. His finances, which he had always believed were robust, began to crumble. He lived a lifestyle predicated on a massive income and even bigger bonuses. Without that money flowing in the payments for his designer apartment, his leased luxury car, and his extravagant credit card bills became insurmountable mountains of debt. Within a month, he was receiving eviction notices. He tried to apologize. He wrote a long, rambling public statement and posted it online, full of corporate jargon about a profound learning experience and a commitment to personal growth. The internet shredded it. Commenters called it a pathetic, insincere attempt at damage control. He tried to find a way to contact Samuel Washington directly to beg for his forgiveness, but the man was a ghost with no public email or phone number. He was a titan of a bygone era, inaccessible to the modern world he had helped build. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, as he was packing his apartment into boxes ahead of his eviction, he hit rock bottom. He was scrolling through a news site when a headline caught his eye. Samuel Washington's foundation pledges $50 million to fund STEM education in underserved communities. The article featured a photo of Samuel standing beside the CEO, David Smith, at a press conference. He was wearing a simple suit not unlike the tweed jacket he'd worn on the train. He looked serene, powerful, and kind. He was talking about opportunity, about giving young people the tools to build a better future. He was a builder. And Kyle, he realized with a sickening lurch, was a destroyer. His entire career had been about acquisitions, about breaking things down, about profiting from the pieces. That was the moment, the last vestiges of his ego, finally shattered. It wasn't just about the money, or the job, or the girlfriend. It was about the fundamental rottenness of the person he had become. Samuel Washington's quiet words on the train echoed in his mind. A life built on looking down on others is a life lived in a deep, dark hole. Kyle finally understood. He was in that hole, and he had dug it himself. The karma that had hit him wasn't an external force. It wasn't bad luck. It was simply the bill for his own character coming due. He had built a life on a foundation of arrogance and cruelty, and when the slightest pressure was applied, the entire structure had collapsed, leaving him buried in the rubble. He sold his Patek Philippe watch for a fraction of its value, just to make rent on a tiny one-room apartment in a run-down part of Queens. The Tom Ford suits were sold to a consignment shop. The leased BMW was returned to the dealership. His fall was as complete as his rise had been meteoric. He took a job that he would have once laughed at. He became a night-shift logistics coordinator for a food delivery service working in a windowless warehouse, tracking inventory on a spreadsheet. The work was anonymous, grueling, and paid just enough to keep him from being homeless. During the long, quiet hours of the night, surrounded by boxes of produce and the hum of refrigeration units, he had nothing but time to think. He thought about his parents who had worked 2 jobs each to send him to a good school. He thought about the person he had wanted to be before the hunger for money and status had consumed him. And he thought about Samuel Washington, a man who had built an empire but still chose to dress simply to ride the trains with ordinary people and to spend his fortune helping others. The hard karma wasn't just about losing his wealth. It was about being forced to confront the poverty of his own soul. He had laughed at an old man's ticket and in doing so had invalidated his own pass to a decent and meaningful life. The road back, if there even was one, was going to be long, and he would have to walk it alone. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, and the world largely forgot about the viral video of the arrogant broker on the train. For the internet, Kyle Thompson was ancient history, replaced by 100 new heroes and villains. But for Kyle, the past 6 months had been a lifetime. Life in the Queen's warehouse was a stark, humbling reality. He had traded his Italian leather office chair for a cold metal stool. His colleagues were not Ivy League graduates, but hard-working immigrants and people trying to make a second start. People he would have never given a second glance to in his previous life. They were a world away from the sharks at Sterling and Finch. They were kind. They shared their food. They talked about their families, and they showed a simple decency that Kyle found both shaming and inspiring. He learned to listen. He learned the names of their children, their dreams and their struggles. For the first time in his adult life, he was seeing people not for what they could do for him, but simply for who they were. The work was monotonous, but his mind, once filled with stock prices and acquisition strategies, was now free to reflect. The anger and self-pity that had consumed him in the first few months began to slowly recede, replaced by a quiet sense of acceptance. He had earned his new life. This was his penance. One evening, his supervisor, a kind, middle-aged woman named Maria, called him over. "Thompson," she said, pointing to a stack of invoices. "There's a special order here. A big donation going out to the Washington Foundation's new youth center in the Bronx. They need a driver to go with the truck just to make sure everything is unloaded and signed for properly. You're good with the paperwork. Do you mind taking it?" The name hit Kyle like a physical blow. The Washington Foundation. Samuel Washington. It felt like a ghost rising from his past. His first instinct was to say no, to run to hide. The shame was still a raw, open wound. But then something shifted in him. Hiding was what the old Kyle would have done. "Yeah, Maria, I can do it," he said, his voice steady. The next morning, Kyle found himself in the passenger seat of a large delivery truck rumbling through the Bronx. The youth center was a beautiful modern building, a beacon of hope in a neighborhood struggling with poverty. Kids were playing basketball on a newly paved court outside. As they unloaded pallets of fresh food and supplies, Kyle saw a familiar figure standing near the entrance, talking to a group of children. He was older, perhaps a bit frailer, but unmistakable. It was Samuel Washington. He was wearing another simple tweed jacket, and he was laughing a genuine, joyful sound as a little girl told him a story. Kyle's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to turn and run to become invisible, but he was frozen in place, watching the man whose life he had so carelessly intersected with. This was what real power looked like. Not a corner office and a tailored suit, but the ability to bring joy and opportunity to a community. As the last box was unloaded, Samuel turned, and his eyes met Kyle's across the parking lot. There was a flicker of recognition in the old man's eyes, but no anger, no judgment. He simply nodded a small, almost imperceptible gesture, and then turned his attention back to the children. The driver got the final signature, and they were ready to leave. As Kyle climbed back into the truck, one of the center's volunteers, a young woman, ran up to him. "Excuse me," she said, a little out of breath. "Mr. Washington asked me to give you this." She handed him a simple white envelope. Kyle's name was written on the front. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was not a letter, but a ticket. It was a standard single-ride ticket for the New York City subway. Tucked into it was a small, neatly folded note. Kyle unfolded it. The note was handwritten in the same elegant cursive he remembered from the lifetime pass. It was short and simple. Mr. Thompson, I believe everyone deserves a second chance to get where they are going. The journey to becoming a better man is the most important trip you will ever take. I wish you a safe passage. It was signed S. Washington. Tears welled in Kyle's eyes, hot and sudden. It was not forgiveness in the way he had imagined it. It was something more profound. It was a quiet acknowledgement of his humanity, a gift of grace from the man he had wronged so deeply. It was not a pass back to his old life of luxury, but a ticket for a new journey, one that started right here at the bottom. Holding the small paper ticket in his hand, Kyle finally understood. True wealth wasn't about a lifetime pass to first class. It was about having the character and humility to be worthy of any ride at all. His old life was gone, destroyed by his own hand. But for the first time in a very long time, Kyle Thompson felt like he was finally on the right track. This story is a powerful reminder that the true measure of a person isn't found in their bank account, their job title, or the luxury they surround themselves with. It's revealed in the quiet moments, in how we treat those we believe are beneath us. Kyle Thompson learned the hard way that arrogance is a debt that karma always collects, often with devastating interest. His fall from grace wasn't just punishment. It was a painful but necessary lesson in humility and respect. Samuel Washington, a titan of industry, showed us that true strength lies not in public power, but in quiet dignity, unwavering grace, and the wisdom to know that everyone's journey has value. If this story of dramatic consequence resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of karma, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with a friend who appreciates stories where life teaches the toughest lessons. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-to-life tales of drama, justice, and the human condition. What did you think of the karma Kyle received? Was it too harsh or exactly what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening.